Hey everyone, Morgan here. So it's time to talk about Album of the Week once again, and this week's is a doozy. It is Moving Pictures by Rush. And I don't think that three people have created a sound as powerful as Rush did since probably Cream with Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker. So Rush was made up of Geddy Lee on bass and vocals, Alex Leifson on guitar, and Neil Peart on drums. And we lost Neil about 2 years ago, but he was technically the most proficient drummer out there. Now, Moving Pictures came out in very early 1981. I would say probably February, maybe March. And this album just ruled the airways when I was in high school. And all of the people that I was friends with would have been listening to it, even though it wasn't what you would consider to be mainstream. Although it was Rush's first steps into mainstream, but they had never really been a band that got tons of radio airplay or had lots and lots of fans. They had a very small, devout following. Definitely a progressive band, and a lot of the people that I was hanging out with that we would probably consider the misfits, those who didn't specifically fit in with any one group, like the athletes or the brains, people along those lines. The outcasts, so to speak, which I was definitely one of. And I remember we played this music a lot when we were playing things like Dungeons and Dragons. It was really a great band for things like that. And then Moving Pictures came. Wow. This album packed a wallop. Side one, every song on side one is worthy of inclusion on Rock and Roll Hall of Fame lists. It started out with Tom Sawyer. It went into a track called Red Barchetta, a song called YYZ, and then finished out with a track called Limelight. Now, you may actually know the track Tom Sawyer because it has been featured prominently in the cartoon South Park, and they even had the guys performing it in one of the episodes. And the radio stations, they liked it. They played it a lot. So great track, straightforward rock and roll. Now, Red Barchetta, or Barchetta, if you're proper Italian pronunciation, it's about a Ferrari. And the drummer wrote all the lyrics for Rush, which was a little bit different for drummers. He was definitely a car guy. He collected cars, and he wrote one based on a story he had read in Car and Driver in the early 70s called a Nice Sunday Drive or a Nice Morning Drive or something along those lines. And it really was autobiographical for a lot of the kids that I knew. They were, thinking about their automobiles a lot, thinking about the person that influenced them. In the case of the song, it's a guy's uncle, and talking about, how cool it is to go and drive on the mountain roads. For us, it was like Mulholland Drive and Laurel Canyon and Coldwater Canyon. Amazing, amazing piece. YYZ, the next one's an instrumental. And actually, the drum beat in it is Morse code for the letters YYZ. And that is the airport code for Toronto. And Rush, being a Canadian band, they would be out on these really long tours, and the tour manager would handle all their luggage, and they'd, come out of their hotel rooms in the morning or after a show, and they'd look at their suitcases and look at the tag to see where they were going next. And if it said LAX, they were going to Los Angeles. If it said JFK, they were going to New York. But they always liked it when they saw the tags YYZ, because that meant they were going home. That the next leg of the trip was at home, and they'd get to see their families again. It's a really difficult piece to play. The drumming on it is amazing. I have seen YouTube video of about a 12 or 14-year-old girl playing it perfectly, and it's just impressive as all get out to watch her play for that. It also makes me happy that a 12-year-old is listening to Rush. And then it closes out with a track called Limelight, which was a little bit autobiographical about musicians and how, unfortunately, fans tend to deify them and not realize that they're just human beings, you know? It's just a very influential, impactful album of the early 1980s. It took progressive rock into the mainstream. And it was actually at about the same time another band, which we'll be talking about later, called Asia, did the same thing. And Asia was made up of a bunch of guys who had been in other prog rock outfits like Yes and King Crimson and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and the bands that normally wouldn't get a lot of radio airplay. And suddenly with their first album, their debut album, it was just all over popular music. And that's kind of what Moving Pictures did for Rush. Now, the one last thing, maybe the most important thing I want to say about this album, is you really needed to own it on vinyl. Hold that big album up because it had an amazing artwork on it. And these guys had a sense of humor. They really had a sense of humor. In fact, the live album that came out after Moving Pictures was called Exit Stage Left. And that is a line from American cartoons and a cartoon character named Snagglepuss, who whenever he got in trouble, he'd be like, exit stage left, and go running off. But what the album covers, the joke, is that, and it's like it's a 3-level joke. It's a triple entendre. It had people carrying paintings, ostensibly out of a museum, although I think it was actually a government building. So they're carrying these paintings out of a museum. So they are moving pictures. But there's a bunch of people on the street looking at the paintings, and these were some pretty heavy pieces. I mean, we're talking stuff that like Caravaggio style. And the people watching the paintings move were crying because the paintings were very moving emotionally, hence they were moving pictures. And then the coolest part was if you flipped the album over and you looked at the back cover, what you saw was a film crew filming the whole thing happening. In other words, they were making a moving picture. So it's just a great joke if you were in on it and you could figure it out. Okay, so play this one. It's good. Great driving music. All right, thanks for tuning in. This is Morgan, and we'll see you next time.